Selamat pagi Pak Edi, Pak Yuli. Selamat bertemu kembali setelah libur panjang. Sebelumnya mengucapkan minal aizin wal faizin, mohon maaf lahir dan batin untuk bapak-bapak dosen semua dan juga rekan mahasiswa yang ada di kampus Sungaran, kampus Siliwangi, kampus Kendal ya. Semoga semuanya senantiasa dalam keadaan sehat selalu. Oh ya, kampus 605 ya, lupa saya. Semoga semuanya dalam keadaan sehat selalu, tidak kurang suatu apa ya. Jadi kita bisa melakukan perkuliahan hari ini dengan baik dan lancar ya. Nah, kita sudah masuk ke pertemuan keempat, yaitu terkait dengan teknik digital dan memaksimalkan ya visualisasi dari desain kita sampai dengan presentasi ya. Nah, nanti akan saya tayangkan selama perkuliahan ya beberapa video saya ambil dari YouTube ya terkait dengan proses digital tersebut ya. Jadi dari kita hand drawing ya, pertama coret-coret ya, kemudian kita digitalkan, setelah itu kita olah dengan software, kali ini dengan SketchUp ya, tapi AutoCAD pun juga bisa Anda nanti. Terus kemudian kita render ya, atau kita maksimalkan tampilannya ya, baik warna, material bangunan yang ada dan lain-lainnya dengan Photoshop. Kemudian setelah itu kita lanjut, terakhir itu sudah dipresentasikan ya, dan termasuk cara bagaimana caranya kita nanti melakukan presentasi, layout presentasi yang baik ya supaya lebih menarik tampilnya. Jadi ada trik nanti, kurang lebih ada 10 trik cara presentasi ya, onboarding nanti ya. Oke, saya share dulu. Untuk materi sudah saya kirim ya, disiapkan, nanti silakan Anda download ya. Oke. Pertemuan keempat kali ini kita mengambil mengambil topik ya, gambar digital ya, terutama bagaimana visualisasi yang maksimal nanti. Memaksimalkan teknik digital, desain rumah dan visualisasi arsitektur. Sebenarnya bukan cuma rumah ya, untuk semua bangunan ya. Nah, supaya apa? Supaya klien kita ya bisa memahami apa yang menjadi visi misi di gagasan kita, kemudian klien kita juga bisa melihat bentuk desain secara realitasnya nanti seperti apa sih secara 3D ya, dan juga klien kita bisa membaca alur tahapan desain, proses desain kita tersebut melalui presentasi yang tepat sasaran ya. Jadi akhirnya bisa deal ya, atau closing begitu. Ada beberapa software yang digunakan dalam hal ini ya, antara lain Adobe Illustrator, kemudian Photoshop, InDesign, dan SketchUp ya, dan satu lagi sebenarnya AutoCAD. Nanti selama pembelajaran ya, setelah saya bahas misalnya satu topik begitu atau satu pembahasan, nanti akan saya seling dengan video ya, tayangan video. Nah, kita akan fokus pada alur praktis dan kreatif dalam merancang desain rumah menggunakan pendekatan digital, baik dari denah, tampak hingga 3D visualisasi dengan dukungan software profesional. Nah, dalam hal ini tujuan pembelajarannya itu Anda dapat memahami tahapan desain rumah secara menyeluruh, dari membuat denah, tampak hingga visualisasi 3D. Ya, dari Anda nanti membuat coret-coret ya, sekedar hand drawing begitu, nanti kita tata, kita gambar ulang dengan digital ya, dengan di sini adalah dengan Illustrator ya, dan dilanjutkan nanti dengan SketchUp ya, terus dipoles dengan Photoshop, dan terakhir dipresentasikan dengan InDesign. Seperti itu urut-urutannya ya. Jadi di sini Anda bisa mampu memanfaatkan software grafis digital, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, SketchUp dalam proses desain, dan Anda mampu menyusun presentasi desain rumah tersebut atau desain bangunan building ya dalam format visual yang komunikatif dan profesional. Ya, seperti yang saya sampaikan di pertemuan minggu yang lalu ya, beberapa bentuk grid, pola grid untuk presentasi ya. Jadi ada beberapa ya, nanti kita ulang agak kita refresh ke belakang sebentar ya terkait mematchkan ya teori yang sudah kita dapat, kemudian kita praktekkan nanti di pertemuan kali ini ya melalui video tutorial. Nah, bagaimana tahapan desain rumah secara digital itu? Yang pertama adalah membuat desain rumah. Langkah awalnya memang ya kita melakukan observasi dulu, kita melakukan wawancara ke si owner ya, baru setelah itu kita tahu kebutuhan mereka itu apa ya, apakah ruang tamu, berapa kebutuhan ruang tidur ya, 2 atau 3 atau bahkan 5, atau mungkin ART juga dibuatkan ruang tidur ya, kemudian zona servis ya, dilanjut dengan menentukan fungsi ruang, sirkulasi dan zonasi ya, publik, non publik, private, semi private dan seterusnya, atau terakhir dengan zonasi servis ya. Nah, sketsa awal itu Anda dapat lakukan manual ya, Anda orat-orat. Jadi untuk khusus mahasiswa grafis itu paling enggak untuk urusan coret-coret tidak boleh diragukan lagi harusnya ya. Anda pasti bisa lah ya membuat gambar secara manual begitu. Kemudian dipindai dan dirapikan menggunakan Adobe Illustrator. Itu yang pertama. Ya, jadi untuk menghasilkan garis dinah yang presisi. Nah, kemudian apa yang kita menjadikan hasil observasi dengan owner atau klien ya terkait dengan kebutuhan ruang. Nah, di sini disusun elemen itu, ada ruang tamu, ruang kamar tidur, dapur, kamar mandi, teras, dan terakhir area servis. Ya. Dan tipsnya gunakan grid dan guides dalam Illustrator untuk menjaga konsistensi, proporsi, dan skala. Ya, saya putar video dulu ya, satu ya. Bisa disimak. Saya stop share dulu. Oke, itu tadi proses membuat desain rumah ya, dari Dina sampai dengan finishing. Nah, kita lanjut aja untuk materi berikut. Ya. Yang kedua, mendesain tampak ya, tadi sudah ya sekalian tadi. Cuma tadi kebetulan videonya langsung ya dari proses rencana Dinah ya sampai dengan tampak jendela, material ya, garis atap, tapi di SketchUp ya. Nah, kemudian untuk proses pemodelan 3D-nya dari SketchUp itu tadi nanti bisa Anda olah di Photoshop ya. Bisa Anda tambahkan ini elemen-elemen kusen, railing, material lantai, pencahayaan ya, bahkan bisa gunakan plugin seperti V-Ray atau Inkscape untuk railing cepat. Tipsnya itu adalah atur scan view untuk menunjukkan perspektif yang paling menjelaskan konsep desain. Nah, software di sini yang dibutuhkan adalah Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator. Saya sebenarnya ada videonya yang Adobe Illustrator ya, tapi untuk mempersingkat waktu tadi saya langsung tayangkan yang SketchUp. Ada Photoshop untuk menyambungkan visualisasi, yaitu bisa menambahkan tekstur, efek pencahayaan, manusia ataupun lanskapnya. Kemudian Adobe Illustrator itu bisa Anda gunakan pada saat membuat Dina tampak berbasis vektor, cocok untuk diagram. Kemudian SketchUp-nya itu bisa untuk membuat model 3D desainnya ya secara tepat, cepat dan intuitif. Dan terakhir adalah Adobe InDesign, dimana itu bisa dipakai untuk menyusun buat presentasi, portofolio, dan buat proyek secara layout profesional. Nah, seperti ini alurnya yang dikerjakan ya. Dan untuk Photoshopnya akan saya tayangkan ya. Saya stop share dulu.
Photoshop is a powerful tool and needed skill in architecture. So in this video, we're going to talk about 10 Photoshop features. In Photoshop, duplicate your image and go to Filters, Others, then click High Pass. In this menu, set it to 1 pixel. The lower the pixel, the better, because making it too high will make the image chunky. Next, click OK, then change the blending mode to overlay. If it's too much, you can lower the opacity of the layer, and you're done. You have a sharpened image. The next one will be enhancing your renders using lighting and specular maps. I always do this trick to make my images more realistic. Just make sure to export the lighting and the specular map of your image. In Lumion, you can export these maps by selecting these buttons before rendering. So in Photoshop, import all images and make sure both lighting and specular map is above the rendered image. Hide the specular map for now and set the layer of the lighting map to overlay. Depending on your preference, set the overlay to about 10 to 20%. This would enhance the image and give some contrast to it. Next, unhide the specular map and set it to screen. This will enhance the reflection of the image. You can lower the opacity to about 10 to 20% as well. You can select all using Ctrl J and create a selection around your object, just like this. Next, we need to add a mask by clicking this icon below. Go to Filter, Blur, then select Motion Blur. Set the angle of the blur and make the pixels to around 20 to 50 pixels. The number depends on the speed of the motion. I like it around 20 to 30 pixels for people walking or running, and 30 to 50 for moving cars. The blur is still a bit chunky at this point. To fix this, double-click the mask and set the feather to about 5 pixels. This will soften out the edges of the selection. The next step is to use Photoshop Actions. Photoshop Actions are basically shortcuts or presets that you can use to automate the redundant actions in Photoshop. It basically records all your actions and does it all again for you once you click play. I made a collection of Photoshop Actions that automate the rendering of floor plans in Photoshop. Check it out in the description below. Let's try to create an action in adding motion blur that we did a while ago. So here's how it works. Before creating the action, we're going to do the selection first, since we want the action to work after the selection has been made. Next, press Alt F9 to open the Actions tab. In this tab, you can see a bunch of actions I've made. To make a new one, click this plus icon below. Give it a name, set a folder you want it saved, and you can also add a function key as a hotkey for the action. Once everything is set, you can hit record and do all the steps. In this case, we're doing motion blur, so just do the steps in adding a motion blur. And once it's done, hit stop recording by clicking this icon here. You can create a selection like this, hit the hotkey you set it to, or you can just click the action from the tab, then click this play button, and it will automatically add a blur for you. The next hack is to use material IDs for your renders. You can export the material ID before rendering and it would look something like this. All you need to do is to import it in Photoshop and make sure the material ID is aligned with the rendered image. You can quickly select using the magic wand tool or press W. In this case, we want to edit the roof of the building because it's a bit off. So what we can do to select them quickly is to go to Select, then click Color Range, click this button, and click the color that you want to select. As you can see, it made a selection for all the roofs since it has the same material ID. You just need to deselect this portion by holding Alt since we don't need it. When enhancing my images, what I like to do is to add hue and saturation to the selection and change the blending mode to overlay. This gives the material a little bit of punch and contrast. Then double click on this icon and you can just adjust these settings to your liking. As you can see, it makes a lot of difference. You can apply this trick to other parts of your image to make it a little bit better. I did this to the white walls and some parts of the building. The next hack will be blending images in Photoshop with one click. First, import the cutout to Photoshop and adjust the scale. I normally get high quality cutouts from mrcutout.com and non-Scandinavian.com. If you want to blend cutouts into your renders easily, just go to Filters, World Filters, then select Harmonize. Select the rendered image as your reference and adjust the strength to about 80. As you can see, it automatically blends the cutouts into your image. We don't need to add shadows anymore since the cutout already got shadows. We can also add a motion blur since she is walking. Do the same steps again to the other cutouts and your renders will transform instantly. For cutouts like this, you can add shadows by adding a new layer and select a soft round brush. Press F5 to open the brush settings and drag these points to change the angle of the brush. Next, just tap like this to add shadows and that's it. Use patterns instead of textures. First, you need to download seamless textures online. I normally get mine from architectures.org. There are a bunch of free textures that you can download from this site. Once downloaded, import it into Photoshop. Next, select everything by clicking Ctrl A, then go to Edit and click Define Pattern. Name the texture and click OK. You can see the newly saved pattern by going to Windows, then select Pattern. This tab, you can see the pattern here. To quickly add textures to your drawing, select the magic wand tool, then select the area that you want to render. Click this icon, then select Pattern. In this menu, select the pattern that you saved and adjust the angle of the pattern and its scale. Do this step for all the parts you want to render. You can use any selection, tweak the textures, and adjust them to your liking. Once everything is rendered, what I like to do is lower the opacity and have this washed out look. The next one would be sky replacement. All you need to do is select the layer, then go to Edit, then click Sky Replacement. Under this menu, there's a bunch of skies that you can choose from. For this case, I'll be choosing this one. You can also adjust these settings to your preference to blend it better. Click OK and it will create new layers for the skies. That's it. The next secret is to use brushes instead of cutouts. Photoshop brushes are very useful especially in adding entourage and scale to your drawings. I have a collection of 3 brushes that I have made, and it is in the description below. You can create your own brushes by downloading an image online, and here's a watercolor tree that I have downloaded. First, add a white background by adding a solid color and make it monochrome by clicking this icon, then select black and white. Double-click the layer and adjust these settings. Make sure the trunk is much darker than the leaves. Next, select everything by clicking Ctrl A, then go to Edit, Define Brush Preset. Name your brush and click OK. Press B to select the brush, and here you've created a brush that you can quickly make when clicking. Add a few more brushes and give some variations out of it, and you're good to go. The last hack will be adding imperfections. The first thing you need to do is to find imperfection textures online. You can find them on Google by just typing imperfection textures or dirty textures. Once you find one, just import it to Photoshop and adjust the scale by clicking Ctrl T, right click, then click Distort. Adjust the points to match the perspective and click and use a soft brush to erase some parts of the texture. And
Oke, kita lanjutkan untuk slide berikutnya ya. Nah, tips visualisasi arsitektur untuk desain rumah yaitu dengan menambahkan skala manusia dan vegetasi ya, supaya terlihat ya proporsionalkah dengan skala manusia tersebut ataupun dengan tanaman yang ada untuk landscape-nya untuk menunjukkan proporsi dan suasana. Anda bisa menggunakan warna hangat dan pencahayaan alami untuk visual yang terkesan ramah dan emosional. Dan terakhir, tampilkan perbandingan denah dan 3D dalam satu layout untuk menunjukkan proses berpikir desain. Nah, terakhir sebagai penutup ada video ya terkait dengan presentasinya ya, sekaligus menutup pertemuan kita hari ini ya. Sebentar saya tayangkan dulu. Ada beberapa grid ya yang bisa dipakai dalam hal ini untuk presentasi ya.
How do we organize them? In this video, we're going to see some methods of composition and storytelling to use in your boards. Your information using InDesign. So I have organized everything around 3 styles of presentation boards. These styles are totally subjective. You guys can give it the name you want, but these can be mixed between them or used separately. So I'm going to show you some examples found on the internet, and if you want to see these styles individually in a more in-depth mode, you can visit my Pinterest page board where you can see all these and more with their respective authors. Let's start with the first style. The first style, and probably the most common style, is the grid style, right? So this consists of dividing your board into a grid and organizing your information accordingly. Sometimes the information can be equally separated in a grid or in a hierarchy, organizing your most important information in bigger parts of the grid and the complementary information in smaller parts of the grid. So let's open InDesign and see how we can do this. I have gathered all the information from a past presentation board, and I'm going to arrange it according to the form of composition we will look at. So I'm going to use a presentation board with a specific size. Next, I'm going to take out some guidelines from our rulers. You can use this to create your grid. Remember that previously you should draw a sketch on a sheet of paper of how you want your presentation board, right? So the information you need to include, the diagrams, plans, etc., etc., etc. So after you create this grid, I'm going to organize the grid leaving two big spaces, right? One for an anatometric illustration and another one for a perspective. So this is the information that is more relevant to understand the project. If the whole project is understood better in a section or it's understood better in a plan, then that is the information that I would put in a bigger size. So sometimes in competitions or in university projects, there's a certain obligation to put plans and sections in a certain scale. So in that case, you have to be creative and make your project stand out, not by composition, but by style. If everyone's boards are going to look the same, you want to make sure your colors stand out much more, or the story your project is going to tell has to be much better. When we're organizing our information, story is a super important element. Ask yourself these questions. What is the story my project is trying to tell? And how can the narrative be adjusted to the presentation boards? For example, in a project we worked with a teammate a few years ago, we had to tell a story of how we were going to stitch the urban fabric to a piece of the city that was predominantly given to the vehicles and was dividing many urban dynamics in the area. Since we knew the jury read this from left to right, we started with a big exploded anatometric image that was going to have the whole project, and we showed all the strategies and actions to take to improve the area, starting from the public spaces, then the urban facilities, and finally the street system. From then on, we continued with other explanatory diagrams, some renders, and a section and a plan, right? So this was many years ago. And let's go back to our presentation board and start dragging the images into our grid. When importing an image, you are going to have various options before the image is placed in the canvas. First, you will see there will be a preview of the image being imported. If you click anywhere, the image is going to be pasted in real size, right? So if the image is bigger than the presentation board, you're going to have to readjust it again. But if you keep the left click pressed for a long time, you're going to have the option to adjust it to your desired size. So there are two ways of resizing your images in InDesign. And the first one is by grabbing the outer transformation tools, adjusting the corners, and pressing right click and pressing fit content proportionally. Or you can also click in the center of the image and using the shift button size the image up or down without messing up its scale or its proportion. Now I'm going to place the two main images in the biggest spaces and the rest of the images around them. You obviously want these little images to be sequential and have a sense that you're reading it in order, right? So the majority of projects go from the general to the specific, right? So from the problem, the solution that we are trying to give to the project, and then the site plans, diagrams, proposal, floor plan, facades, sections, and finally the renders. This is, you can say, the traditional method of how you present a project, but you can also always break the rules and start with the section or the renders. You know, the main goal is that you have a story to tell and the organization of the images support that story. And you also want to know where your main text is going to go, right? So sometimes you know you need to have a text, but you don't have the text defined yet. So you can click the text tool, create a rectangle of where there's going to go text, and fill it with fake text. You know, that's another awesome tool of InDesign. The next style of boards is our main image board. In this style, the whole project centers around one main image, or it can be a plan, a diagram, or a render, and there are complementary images that go around it in a secondary way. So let's say this is my main image, and I'm going to drag it in and make it fill the entire board. Now I'm going to import some plans that we're going to put just on top, and also insert some text and a main title. Now typically we would use this style, as I was saying, for competitions where minimum information is required and we don't need that many details in our project. The final style is the blend board, where there isn't independent images acting by themselves like in our grid style, and there isn't one big image, having all the attention, but there is a general style of composition that blends all the images together and makes all the images just equally as important. For creating this style, I recommend you do mostly everything in Photoshop or Illustrator, because InDesign doesn't have that much option to edit images, right? So once you edit your images into a big composition in Photoshop or Illustrator, import it to InDesign and add your text. So once you understand these three methods of composition, you can do many things, right? You can even blend 2 or 3 styles, and sometimes you have to do more than one presentation board. So you can use each presentation board for each style, and you can tie them all together with the story of your project. So remember that elements like colors, typography, and drawing style is what ties the whole boards together and gives that awesome aesthetic. As you can start seeing, InDesign is a very easy to use tool for presentation boards. The most important things you need to know is just like setting up your file, importing and resizing images, and putting text. That's basically it. So thank you all for watching. If you want me to review your portfolio on our IGTV channel, you can send it over to our email. For those of you that don't follow us on Instagram, you can follow us at Let's Show It Better, and there you guys can see my portfolio and some other portfolios that we are going to review in the future. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next video.
Oke, begitulah untuk perkuliahan kita hari ini ya. Terima kasih atas perhatiannya. Mohon maaf jika ada salah kata. Kita ketemu lagi di kesempatan mendatang. Pak Edi, Pak Yuli, Pak Wiwi, terima kasih, dan rekan mahasiswa semua. Sehat selalu.